Okay.
So, welcome to another episode of Small Biz Live with the NRBBA. My name is Mickey Marraffino with Mickey on Marketing, and today I am honored to introduce to everybody Steve Goldstein, who is the president of Payroll Management Solutions. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Mickey. Hi. Nice to be here.
It's great to have you.
Thank you.
I know you from so many different groups that I'm involved with. You're a big volunteer in our community,
Yes,
um, and
as are
on the
you.
NR,
As are you.
and on the NRBBA, you are our treasurer. So thank you so very much for that. Greatly, greatly appreciated.
My pleasure. Great organization. Happy to help.
So tell us a little bit about payroll management solutions. As long as I've known you, I don't really know a lot about your business.
Okay.
First, let's get started with how did you get started in payroll?
That's a great question. It was back in 1983, so we're talking, what, 17, no, 30, wow,
Long,
37,
long time ago.
37 years. When I was 4 years old, I literally, I accidentally stumbled into the payroll service industry. I had no idea such a thing existed. I was in my mid-20s. I was trying out different sales positions. I was an entertainer at the time. I thought my future was going to be in music. I had planned for that, a career as a songwriter and a performer. And by the age of 26 or 27, I was thinking, this may not be going the way I hoped. I really need to make a respectable living. I was already living at the beach cities. I was already in Hermosa Beach and Redondo Beach back then. And I was doing different sales jobs. I had sold copiers. I sold dictating machines. I sold long distance telephone service. And back then, if you were looking for a new job, you looked at the want ads in the newspapers
I
back in the,
remember.
back in the olden days, kids. And I saw an ad for a payroll service, which again I'd never heard of. At the time, the company was called Payphone Systems, Pay-Phone. Terrible name for a payroll company. People thought we sold payphones, but it stood for payroll by telephone. This particular company had a specific technology where clients could dial into a mainframe computer from their touch tone phones and transmit payroll data electronically. It was very ahead of
Wow.
its time. They were the only ones that
Yeah.
offered it. Eventually, they became Precision Payroll. But they said in this ad that they were looking for salespeople. And if you've had any experience ever selling copiers or dictating machines or long distance service, we'd like to talk to you. I said, well, I've done all three just this
And they
year.
were they were talking to you.
We're talking to me. And I went in and I interviewed for the position. And the guy said, and this is very funny, he said, I could hire you because I need salespeople, but I think you're changing jobs too quickly. I think, maybe you're job hopping a little too fast every 6 months or so. You might want to think about that. Call me back tomorrow if you're still interested. I'll move you forward in the process. So I called him back. I was selling long distance service at the time. I called him the next day. I said, I thought about what you said, and I think you're right. I think I might be leaving this position too quickly. So how do you guys handle your long distance? And I got an appointment with him and the guy who's in charge of that company's long distance service. I did a presentation for them. I determined I could only help 3 of their 10 branches that they had at the time, and I advised them to stay with Sprint. I said, thanks for your time. I think you're doing better off with Sprint. And I left. And this guy called me back an hour later and he said, I think we should reopen our negotiations. So he hired me. And for the first time in my young sales career, for some reason, I suddenly started hitting it out of the park. I started realizing everywhere I went, every business, every retail store, every law office, doctor's office, they all had employees, which meant they all had payroll.
Mhm.
And they were all doing payroll somehow. They were using some form of a payroll service or doing it themselves. And I was there trying to find a problem I could solve for them and switch them over to my payroll service. And suddenly I became like a top hitter, a top producer in this company, and quickly started getting promoted into management positions and recruited to other payroll companies, bigger payroll companies, smaller payroll companies. And I've been doing this now for 37 years. And then 16 years ago, 2004, I stepped out on my own and decided to start Payroll Management Solutions because I had found by that point in my career, I knew what was working and what wasn't working for the big payroll companies and the small payroll companies. I knew intimately what clients liked and respected and wanted and what they found annoying and frustrating. And so I wanted to be the guy in charge who could determine the quality of their customer experience. And that's how we found the payroll management solutions.
And that's my favorite is customer experience. I love that. That's so important,
It
especially
is.
with something as critical as payroll. I mean, that's
Exactly.
the only reason we work, right? I mean, a lot of us love our
Exactly. If the
jobs,
employees don't get
fortunately.
paid on time, that's job one. If your employees aren't getting paid and they're not happy, then it doesn't matter what else you're doing.
Exactly.
Employees have to be paid on time, and that's our number one responsibility, along with making sure their payroll taxes are paid properly and on time.
So there's
And that's
so
our
much
two things.
technology involved in payroll.
Yeah,
How do you have your own proprietary technology, or
we
how
do
how did
now.
you how did you I mean, that seems like the most complicated part, to have your own business.
We started out licensing another software that is licensed to many independent payroll service providers throughout the country. And after a while, we decided too much reliance on this particular vendor, this licenser that was licensing the software. So my partner is very technical, and he decided to team up with some other people and create a proprietary software that we own. And so that killed our reliance on the other provider and gave us a lot more flexibility, independence, control over pricing, and if this other company had decided to raise their fees to us, we would have no choice but to raise our fees to our customers. And we wanted to have control over that, not to be dictated to by somebody we were licensing software from. So we
Right.
do now have our own proprietary software. It's called ReadyPay. So
Okay, awesome.
yeah,
So why are you better than like an ADP or a Paychex, some of the bigger companies that we might
perfect.
be familiar with?
Those are the two national competitors, both of whom I've worked for in my career in management positions. But I would say that's where the majority of our clients come from, those two companies that you just named, ADP and Paychex.
Okay.
And the reason they come to us is they become frustrated with the level of service they're getting. Then they suddenly realize first of all, they're paying more and more every year because those companies are publicly owned companies. They raise their fees on an annual basis like clockwork. I like to tell people, this is the analogy I use, and I think this draws a clear picture. They are large national factories, and we're the small local boutique. We're the mom and pop payroll service on the corner here in your neighborhood, easy to reach, quick to respond, and it's a response business. It's all about, if payroll's running well and there's no problems, that's great. Nobody's going to have any problem. Nobody wants to fix something that isn't broke. But
Hmm.
when you do have an issue and you need to get somebody right now on the phone or send an email and get a response within an hour, no longer than that, and you don't get that response, then you start to realize the frustration level starts to build. Your blood pressure starts to go up. And you maybe have employees who haven't been paid, and they'll say, "Where's my direct deposit?" Or you've got a notice from the IRS or the EDD saying there's an issue with your tax deposits, and you need an answer now. You need it resolved now so you can get it off your desk and get back to what you do, your business, whatever that is.
Right.
And so our job is to reduce that response time as quickly as possible, get that problem off your plate, solve it for you so that you can move on and get it off your plate and out of your mind. And it's all about peace of mind. There are no contracts in the payroll service. You're not bound to us or ADP or Paychecks for a year or whatever because you signed a contract. There are no contracts. They're service agreements. They're payroll to payroll. You can leave anytime you want. There's no penalty. And people do that. And just this past week, I've received a couple of calls from companies that were with another payroll service that sold to ADP. I got two calls in a row, 2 days in a row, saying the company we use just got sold to ADP. I don't want to transition to ADP. Please help us out. And we're starting both of those companies next week in July with their first payroll of the third quarter. Perfect time to start. So that's what happens. They know already they don't want to be with ADP, and if they do nothing, they're going to be with ADP. So they were referred to us by different referral sources, and we're going to help them out. So
So with ADP and Paychex, because they're such big companies, do
yeah.
they have some bells and whistles that people think maybe a smaller payroll company doesn't offer, but you do offer it? What is some of that?
There's a few things. Well, first of all, we all offer the online service and employee self-service. So there's always a portal you can go to run your payroll automatically or run it online. Or if you're not comfortable with the technology, there's always a service rep who can help you take the payroll over the phone or by email. We prefer not to, but if that's the only way they'll do it, of course we'll do it. Some of the things that ADP and Paychex do that we don't is they try to be all things to all people by getting into fields that are supplemental to payroll. They want to sell you insurance. They want to sell you workers' comp. We can do that, but we prefer not to compete with our referral sources. Insurance people refer us business because we're not competing with them on the level that ADP and Paychex are trying to compete with them. They try to emulate what's called in our business a PEO. It stands for Professional Employment Organization. It used to be called employee leasing. It's a co-employment scenario, and there's a lot of downside to it, but mostly it's expensive because they charge you a percentage of your gross payroll rather than a flat fee per check. our fee doesn't change depending on the size of your payroll. Well, the number of employees affects the price.
Okay.
But if somebody's making minimum wage or somebody else is making, 200,000 a year, the cost of the check is the cost of the check. It has nothing to do with the size, the dollar amount of those checks. So when someone calls me and says, I have a $500,000 payroll, what do you charge for that? I can't answer that. A $500,000 payroll means nothing to me. I need to know how many people are you paying and how often do you pay them. And with that information, I can give you an accurate price quote. It doesn't depend on what somebody's earning. It depends how many checks you have and how often you do it.
Wow,
Very
that's really
simple.
interesting. So, so that's, I mean, I would think that that's great because obviously what you do is more based on the number of employees versus the actual dollar amount. The dollar amount
Completely.
is kind of irrelevant to what you do.
It's irrelevant. That could be going all to one employee or that could be going to 10 employees. I'd rather have 10
Right.
employees than one. However, nobody's too small and nobody's too large for us. We take any size employer. You have employees, you have a payroll, which means you have, you know, potential problems. There's a million ways you could get in trouble without knowing it, with all the different taxes that have to be paid and when they have to be paid, and keeping track of people's time off accruals and
Right.
everything that we do. We track all that for you, and we take responsibility for that, so that you don't have to do it. All you have to do is report the payroll to us once per pay period, and you're done. And the direct
And
deposits are hitting.
and how do you I saw on your website that you also really kind of help the bottom line,
Hmm.
reduce expenses. How does having you manage payroll reduce expenses for the small business?
Well, to start with, the time it takes to do payroll. If you're doing your own payroll manually, there's somebody that you and I both know who owns a shop in the Galleria, and he was doing payroll himself manually, small payroll. And every 2 weeks, his employees would come to him. He's a retail shop. He sells watches, and he loves to sell watches.
Our friend Tea Time.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And he would see, I'd see him at chamber events all the time, and he would ask me questions like, "So tell me again what you do. How much does that cost me? I've got 5 employees." His problem was that every 2 weeks, first of all, he had to be reminded. His employees would come up and say, "Hey, it's today's payday. Am I going to get paid today?" He would say, "Oh no," and he'd have to lock himself in his office in the back of the store, take himself off the sales floor, which is where he loves to be, showing nice watches and things to his clients. He loves that. Now he's got to lock himself up for an hour and calculate the payroll and write the checks and pay the taxes, and nobody can bother him. Nobody can knock on that door and disturb him. Otherwise, it's going to take longer. So just the time that it takes him to do that was time away from his sales floor, time off of his bottom line. He's not selling watches when he's locked up in his office calculating payroll. And when
Right.
he found out how little we charge to do that and take that completely off his plate, he loves it. He's been with us for years now. I've been telling that story for 10 years, how I gave time back to the guy who sells time for a
Yeah,
living. I love
that's
telling people that.
awesome.
But that's a
And
perfect example of what you're asking.
that
I
makes
gave
so
him
much
back his
sense.
time, and there's no value. There's no price tag for that.
Right. And
Yeah.
I know, especially during this time with COVID-19, you have made yourself available to all of the people who attend and participate in the NRBBA, especially
Hmm.
obviously the small businesses, to help them navigate the PPP, the Payroll Protection
The
Program,
paycheck protection
paycheck,
program.
yeah, Paycheck
Yeah, I know it's
Protection
hard.
Program.
They're very
And
similar.
yeah, so please tell
Yes.
us a little bit about that and how you've been able to not only help your clients, but also help other small businesses in the NRBBA understand that.
Sure. In the beginning, when the program first came out, I was advising people on how to apply for the loan in the first place, and I was
Right,
getting them the applications. And for those who are clients of ours, one of the main things the application wanted was your payroll records to see how much payroll you were paying before the pandemic, and based on that information, they would determine how much of a loan you would qualify for.
right.
So we were providing those reports. We have them. We're doing the payroll. And we created, our clients all started calling us up and emailing us saying, "Can you get me this report? Can you get me that report?" So we quickly realized, obviously, a huge need. We created a portal specifically for that request. So all they had to do was
Oh,
click on this link and make the request online and get the reports, within 24 hours that they needed to apply for the loan. Next step came forgiveness of the loan, how to spend that money once you got it so
right.
that you're forgiven the loan and you don't do something wrong and have to end up paying it back. The whole purpose of the Paycheck Protection Program is to allow you to pay your employees, bring them back to work if they've been furloughed or laid off. You can bring them back, and now the payroll is covered by a loan, a forgivable SBA loan, no interest, as long as you spend it as prescribed. And I help people determine, and those rules keep changing, by the way. So everything I told them, 2 weeks ago changed. Instead of 8 weeks to pay it back, now you've got 24 weeks. Instead of having to use 75% of it for payroll, you can now use 60% of it for payroll. And the remaining expenses are rent, lease, utilities, things like that. So I'm a repository for that information. Anybody can call me anytime and say, what's the latest on getting forgiven on the PPP loan? And I have the latest stuff. I can send it to them. I can explain it to them. I can speak to them. So it's a time saving thing because people are confused. It changes every day, and you really have to stay up on it. We've made it our business to stay current day by day.
Well, and that makes you worth your weight in gold to your clients for sure, and also helping out the small businesses that you don't actually even do business with in the NRBBA because
Yeah,
you're an expert in that subject matter.
we're happy to help. I want to be a resource. That's our main goal in life is to be a resource for people so that they think of you when they have a need. And when they think, well,
Exactly.
who do I know that does payroll? They
And
think,
like
oh, wait,
me,
Steve.
so many
Yeah,
people know what you do, but we don't really know what you do.
yeah.
And it sounds like even a small business like mine, which is just me, could
Hmm.
really use payroll services just to keep everything legal and to help me with 1099s and
Yeah.
all that kind of fun stuff.
Tax returns, your quarterly payroll tax returns that have to be done whether you're doing payroll or not. Once you filed with the EDD and IRS, they're looking every quarter for a return from you. If you have no payroll, you have to fill out a zero balance return. Well, we do that.
Okay,
We have a lot of self-employed people that pay themselves a couple of times a year, and the rest of the year we're just filing zero balance returns for
awesome.
those. Yeah.
Well, it's so great to learn about what you do, Steve. So, what size companies are kind of your? You said no one's too big and no one's too small. Obviously, we just
Yeah.
talked about you. You will do payroll for someone like me who's just one employee, but also like what would be the largest that you would work with?
Well, the biggest client we've had is 2,000 employees,
Okay,
but that
okay,
was an anomaly. We go as high. We have several that are in the 100 to 200 employee range. A lot in the 50 to 80 range, and we have a lot of people with 5 to 25 employees.
okay,
The majority of small businesses have 10 or less employees. There's a lot of them out there, so that would be a quantity situation more than a you know
right,
one huge payroll client. I'd rather have 20
small,
mid-size or small payroll clients and have all of them be happy
great, great.
and referring us to other people.
Okay. Is there, so where would we get more information about payroll management solutions?
Well, our website, if you can see it behind me, payrollmanagementsolutions.com. A lot of information
Okay.
there, including our phone number. You can email me at steve@payrollmanagementsolutions.com.
Okay.
We're on Facebook at facebook.com/payrollmanagementsolutions.
Okay.
And we're on Instagram and Twitter. And what else? Oh, of course, LinkedIn.
Okay.
And on my website are links to my Facebook and LinkedIn
Okay.
pages. So,
Okay.
there's a
Great.
million ways to reach us.
We'll
Yeah.
we'll be able to find you. I'll make sure that I post all those links. Also, we'll post this interview on YouTube on the NRBBA's page, and we'll have all those links there too.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Thanks for giving us a portion of your Saturday and an early happy Father's Day to you.
Thank you.
Hope
Thank
you
you.
have a great day tomorrow and every day. And we will talk to you soon.
Thank you very much, Mickey. Bye,
Okay,
everybody.
bye. It's great to see you.
Bye.
Bye.
You too.